ISKCON BBT founder Acharya, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru. All glories to Shri Guru. Please. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 23, Text 30. Melanie?
Ja.
Ich glaube, es ist okay. Somebody has phone? Your phone? Somebody else?
I have one.
You have one?
Yes.
Okay, maybe those of you want to read the verse. Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
It's text 30. Yeah. Kirtidam tasya charitam.
Kirtidam tasya charitam.
Kirtidam tasya charitam.
Kirtidam tasya charitam.
Udama charitasya chete.
Uttama charitasya te.
Udama charitasya te.
Uttama charitasya te.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Udama charitasya te.
Uttama charitasya te.
Please chant.
Itam bhutanubhavos.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Uttama charitasya te.
Uttama charitasya te.
Itam bhutanubhavosa.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Pritusa bhagavatmanaha.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Kirtidam tasya charitam.
Uddama charitasya te.
Dhamma charitasya te. Mataji.
Itam bhutanubhavosa.
Itam bhutanubhavoso.
Pritusa bhagavatama.
Pritusa bhagavatamaha.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Kirtitam tasya charitam.
Uddama charitasya te.
Udama charitasya te. Word for word translation. Itam bhuta
Itam bhuta.
das.
Das.
Anubhavaha.
Anubhavaha.
Very great, powerful.
Very great, powerful.
Aso.
Aso.
That.
That.
Prituhu.
Prituhu.
King Pritu.
King Pritu.
Saha.
Saha.
He.
He.
Bhagavatamaha.
Bhagavatamaha.
The best among the lords.
Best among the lords.
Kirtitam.
Kirtitam.
Described.
Described.
Tasya.
Tasya.
His.
His.
Charitam.
Charitam.
Character.
Character.
Udama.
Uddama.
Very great.
Very great.
Charitasya.
Charitasya.
One who possesses such qualities.
One who possesses such qualities.
Te.
They.
To you.
To you.
Translation. Maitreya continued. The greatest of all devotees, Maharaj Prithu, was very powerful, and his character was liberal, magnificent, and magnanimous. Thus I have described him to you as far as possible. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the word Bhagavatamaha is very significant, for the word Bhagavat is used specifically to refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the word Bhagavan, brackets, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is derived from the word Bhagavat. Sometimes, however, we see that the word Bhagavan is used for great personalities like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Narad Muni. This is the case with Prithu Maharaj, who is described here as the best of the Bhagavans, or the best of the Lords. A person can be so addressed only if he is a great personality who exhibits extraordinary and uncommon features, or who attains the greatest goal after his disappearance, or who knows the difference between knowledge and ignorance. In other words, the word Bhagavan should not be used for ordinary persons. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Namo Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Tang Bhutana Bhavo Sao Pritusa Bhagavatama Kirtitam Tassa Charitam Udama Charitasya Te. Maitreya continued, the greatest of all devotees, Maharaj Prithu, was very powerful, and his character was liberal, magnificent, and magnanimous. Thus I have described him to you as far as possible. Hare Krishna. So, this is another verse. We are coming close to the end of Maharaj Prithu's pastime, and now actually the description of the pastime has ended. And here in this verse, it's again pointed out how Maharaj Prithu was very powerful, and his character was liberal, magnificent, and magnanimous. And in the verse itself, in the Sanskrit verse, there is a word used which Prabhupada elaborates a bit in the purport. It's a short purport though. And that word is Bhagavatamaha. So Bhagavan is a very common word, you know. Even those who just came for the Bhakti Yoga course, our two main scriptures, they have the word Bhagavan, or at least Bhagavat inside. And that is in many ways, and maybe we want to talk about this today, but if we want to be God conscious, and we are here in this material world, we are conditioned, we are not able to see God, right? So, but we want to cultivate that, and for this, sound is very important, and sound means words. Vedas, they are knowledge received in the form of words. So we tend to, in our daily life, use words maybe sometimes a little bit unconsciously, but in the Vedas, every word is very consciously chosen. And so I would say, I'm not a big scholar, but when it comes to the primary, there's many names of God, right? We want to describe God. There's so many names because God has unlimited forms. So then describing the unlimited forms and their characteristics and what God does in these forms, it becomes innumerable names as well. But then when it comes to really describing who is God, then Bhagavan seems to be the primary word. And I just tried to get some information. I was watching one interview of Chaitanya Charampaprabhu from Chowpatty, from India, and he was saying in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Mahabharata usually, and Bhagavad Gita is a part of Mahabharata, when somebody speaks, Vyasadeva says Krishna, Vacha, or all these names, but then in Bhagavad Gita, he uses the word Bhagavan in order to make a point. He wants to establish the position of Krishna and Prabhupada, he translated the term as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now in this verse, Prabhupada is pointing out that Bhagavan is not only used for God, it is also used for great personalities, and he gives the criteria. And if you analyze the purpose, he gives 3 criteria for someone who can be called Bhagavan. One is a person who exhibits extraordinary and uncommon features, one who attains the greatest goal after his disappearance, or one who knows the difference between knowledge and ignorance. And then Prabhupada is saying, Bhagavan should not be used for ordinary persons. And we know that the words get misused, and Bhagavan has also been misused. There has been some gurus which people started to call Bhagavan. I'm not sure who, I think Osho, they called Bhagavan Osho, right? And Osho was a so-called guru who was propagating his own philosophy, which is actually not based on any authority.
Recently in India also, Amma Bhagavan.
Amma.
He's calling Amma Bhagavan, one man and wife. So now, but 2-3 years before, the police chased them.
Because of that?
No, not that, because they did so many other wrong things, They call themselves Amma Bhagavan. So
Amma Bhagavan.
Yeah, like Bhagavan,
Yeah.
Gold people they have so many money and those get got from people and went away.
Okay. Prabhupada used to say, nowadays there are so many Bhagavans. And it just reminds me, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, there was this one bogus guru which he imprisoned and defeated. They called him
Also,
Falgu Bhagavan.
Falgu
Bhagavan. And he had mystic powers and all that. So, like we said, if we hear from the very beginning, and also yesterday, Ananda Chaitanya Prabhu was saying how our path of God realization begins by chanting the name, and then Guna Rupa Lila. The other aspects will be revealed. But sound seems to be the starting point of self-realization, God realization, and that's why it's so important that the sound keep its full power. And if people get confused about, what does it mean, if Bhagavan just becomes some common word, then the idea doesn't transmit anymore to the consciousness of the living entity. So let us first understand what Bhagavan actually means. And Bhagavan, it has it's a compound of two words, one being Bhaga and the other one Van. And Van means something like one who possesses. And I just, because I became curious myself, there are many words which have this Van in the end. I was searching in the database and I was looking up Bhagavad Gita, and I just would like to see if you also know other words which contain that Van in the end, other than Bhagavan, in Bhagavad Gita. And there's quite a few of them, even in famous verses. Anyone remembers one? One is famous, Shraddhavan Bhajate Shraddhavan. One who, Shraddha, possesses faith. Then another famous one, Jnanavan Mam Prapadyante. One who possesses Gyan, knowledge. Actually in the verse 5 and 6 already there is one word, it's Viryavan. Virya means strength, power. Bhishma Dev is called Pratapavan, which is translated as valiant. I had to look this word up because I'm not a native English speaker. Then the word Atmavan is used, one who possesses. It's translated as established in self. Interesting. Then Balavan, one who is powerful, and that's in the 16th chapter, and also in the same 16th chapter there is the last one, Abhijanavan, one who is surrounded by aristocratic relatives. So what means Bhagavan? What means Bhaga?
Possessor. Another for opulences.
Opulences, yeah. And there is a verse, I just also found it on the database, Prabhupada quoted that. He, in the Bhagavad Gita, the first verse where Krishna speaks, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, Prabhupada explains now the word Bhagavan. And he says, Vyasadev, he describes the meaning, but he doesn't give the verse, he just describes in the purport. But he refers there to a verse in the Vishnu Purana, which describes what are the Bhaga, what is Bhaga. And that verse is Vishnu Purana 6.5.47. Aishvaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashasa shriyaha jnana vairagya yoschaiva sannam bhaga itingana. You know that verse? No, Krishna.
Describe the 6 opponents of Bhagavan.
Right. So Bhaga refers to 6 opulences, and I'm sure most of you have heard of them, but for the sake of strengthening our memory, maybe everybody can say one.
Beauty. Beauty.
Beauty,
Wealth.
wealth,
Austerity.
renunciation, yeah.
Knowledge.
Fame.
Fame,
Knowledge.
knowledge,
Power.
strength, power. So beauty, fame, you said wealth, wealth, fame, renunciation, strength, and knowledge. These 6. So that is the meaning of Bhagavan, and that word is being used as often to really make a point that that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We have a few verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course I think the most famous verse is Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. It's called the Paribhasa Sutra, right, of Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't remember what it means, Paribhasa Sutra, but it really establishes Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what does it mean? Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Swayam means himself. That Krishna is Bhagavan himself. Then there is another one which Prabhupada also, he quotes that in the first purport of the first verse, where Sri Bhagavan Vacha is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. He quotes this Brahman Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Shaktite, the three aspects, and the highest one being Bhagavan. Now, Bhagavan, as we heard, is also used for powerful people. Means it doesn't necessarily have to be used for God himself. And it makes sense because if somebody is very powerful, he's also Bhagavan. And Prabhupada, I'm not sure if he's comparing it, but you can compare it to the word Lord in English, I guess, or in German, the Herr. So we say, nowadays I don't think you say really that you call a person Lord, but in the past, people, they had a title like Lord such and such.
Yeah.
And we actually, in German language, the word when we address somebody as Mr. is Herr. And in the Bible also it's often used, der Herr. But then it's, the Lord. Der Herr. Means there is many lords, but there is only one Lord. And Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. He's the Bhagavan. He's that establishes that of all those who possess many opulences, he's the one who possesses them in full. So there is no controversy in that. We see that in our language as well. And yeah, it depends how it is used. Now here, Prithu Maharaj is a Shakti Vaishya avatar, so he's not exactly Swayam Bhagavan, right? There is a difference. And here the word Bhagavatamaha is used. So Bhagavan Uttamaha, the best of the Bhagavats. And if you analyze it, this is also not really the word you can use for Krishna, or maybe it's not the best one. So you rather say, he's the Bhagavan. He's not the best Bhagavan, because that will kind of put him again on the, you compare him with others, but you cannot compare Krishna. And Prabhupada used to often, if somebody was saying, he's Bhagavan, or that glorifying somebody, he was making very simple points that, Krishna is Bhagavan. He showed he was Bhagavan, and he often said, Krishna, when he was a small boy, he would lift Govardhan Hill with one finger and hold it for 7 days. Show me which you're Bhagavan who can do this. It's a very simple thing, but that's actually what Krishna did. And what does it show? His inconceivable strength. Nobody can do it. And there is many strong persons in this universe. In this material world we have strong people. There is, I think, the strongest person can even drag a truck because he's so strong. And then of course in the higher planetary systems, Indra is supposed to be very strong. But compared to Krishna, it's like a spark compared to the fire. And so Krishna is all of these opulences in full beauty. The other day I was reading in Krishna book the chapter Krishna enters Mathura. And there it is described, the citizens of Mathura, they have heard about Krishna, because Krishna, when he was born, immediately he was transferred to Vrindavan, to the house of Yashoda and Nanda Baba. And he lived there for many years, and what was his age when he came? 16?
To Mathura.
Yeah.
11.
He was 11?
Yeah.
Wow. He was 11 years old, and so Vrindavan, Mathura was not too far, so the Mathura Vasis, the inhabitants of Mathura, they would hear about Krishna. They never saw him, but they would hear about his glories. And of course they heard many things, including his beauty as well. So then it's described, Krishna, he came, Akrura, he came to Vrindavan to bring him to Mathura. And when they arrived at the gate to Mathura, Krishna, actually a little bit before, I think, he told Akrura, stop, I want to get down from the chariot. And he told him, you go in, you go home, and we'll meet later. I will wait for my the bridge passes and we go together. And then they walked in through the gate and walked through the roads of the city. And it is described that the word spread swiftly that Krishna has arrived, Balaram and Krishna came. And everybody heard about them, and everybody was, of course, longing for that moment to see. And as soon as they heard, everybody dropped everything. The women, they tried to make themselves nice, but they couldn't. They put one earring, they had maybe one eyelash, put some makeup, they even put their dress in the wrong way. It's described some men who were taking bath, they stopped taking their bath even if it was incomplete, and just took something and went out and up to the roof. The women, they went up to the roof because the houses were built in a way that you could, like nowadays in India, no? You see the houses, you can go to the roof and then you can overview. And that point, when I read it, you see a slight difference between the material and spiritual world, how the women, they tried, to prepare themselves in a way to look nice, but eventually they didn't really care about it. Here in the material world, if a woman, we can also take a man as an example, but if let's say you go on a date, you would never do that. Even if you are not on time, you would make sure you look impeccable, because the whole result on that date would be dependent on how you look. But here it's something else we see. They are so mad after Krishna that they don't care about that external anymore. When they saw Krishna, it was like they drank his beauty through the eyes. And at one point it's even mentioned that some they fell unconscious because he was so beautiful. We see how in this material world, now one could say, there is some superstars and groupies fall unconscious when they meet him. Yeah, that might be there. I don't have any experience, but I think here in this point it's really because the beauty of Krishna was so overwhelming that it couldn't be handled by their consciousness, and the bodies will be unconscious. So that's why we have to hear about Krishna, and by hearing about Krishna we hear about his qualities and his opulences, and then we become faithful that actually this is not an ordinary person, it's the Supreme Personality of God. And that's what is meant by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada, he coined that term, before that was not he. And in the beginning, when you read Prabhupada's books, you hear it again and again, Prabhupada, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme. One might wonder in the beginning, why not just God, it will make things easy. But he's making that point that he's not if we look in the material world, we have superior and inferior, and it's based on these bhagas. One who is very intelligent, he will be superior. One who is beautiful will be in some kind superior. One who is very strong, and one who has the most out of them, he will be, like a very powerful king. You see, the kings in the Vedic time, they had all of the opulences. They were very beautiful, very strong, very wealthy, very famous, very knowledgeable as well. Even though the Brahminical class is the one who really deals with knowledge as an occupation, the kings, that's why they were sometimes called Raja Rishis, because they were actually knowledge not inferior in some way. They also understood the conclusion. And renunciation, even the kings were very renounced. Of course they enjoyed, but then they were renounced. So that's why the kings were established as the head. Of course the Brahminical class is over them, but the Brahminical class was also functioning in a way under the protection of the king. And who became the king? The person who had the most of these opulences, who contained the most. He was the natural leader in society. So these bhagas, they will, make kind of a hierarchy naturally, and will make society into supreme, or superior and inferior. But then that's why Prabhupada uses the word the supreme, not superior, but the supreme, because he has all these qualities in full. So Prabhupada, I think we should be very grateful, and I would just, as the last point I would like to mention, this was a short purport, and in the beginning I was thinking, what can I say? And that it happens sometimes to me when I have to give class, but then when I just calm down and sit down and reflect a little bit, so many things come up, and you see how Prabhupada, why does he explain what he explains in the purport, to really give us the right understanding, and in order for us to be able to receive the right understanding of Krishna, of God, and become Krishna conscious, because there's so many obstacles, and the biggest obstacle is definitely if we cannot describe God in words, because the whole idea of becoming Krishna conscious is based on listening. Prabhupada, he sacrificed so much of his energy and time to write books. Why? Because the Vedas were there, the knowledge was there, but unfortunately we being born in a time and a culture where we don't learn Sanskrit, we didn't have access to it. It was like a locked cupboard. It's there, but you cannot open it. So he took the trouble to translate all these Vedic Sanskrit texts into English, and by having them in English, we can then understand in that language. In our local language. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai ki jai, Shri Shri Gaurikai ki jai. Now, for those of you who are in the Bhakti Yoga course, I like to go a little bit into the Sanskrit terms, and also even though we have it in English, I think one who is serious should not neglect to try to understand Sanskrit terms, because many of these terms you cannot really translate them. Yesterday I was listening briefly to a class of Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, just short, and he was speaking about he wanted to speak about rasa, something rasa, and he said we cannot really translate that word, but I guess you know what I mean. So it's very difficult sometimes to translate. But Prabhupada, he tried, and he was probably the most empowered, he was empowered to do that. Often you see how he translated things. He was not whimsically doing, he was putting a lot of effort. Like Supreme Personality of Godhead, he chose the words very wisely. Devotional service, he chose the words very wisely. We spoke about it in the Bhakti course as well. So even though I'm not saying one has to learn Sanskrit. One actually can reach perfection by just reading Prabhupada's books. But why not? Prabhupada, why did he give the word for word translation? Because he wanted us to develop some basic knowledge, understanding of Sanskrit words and terminology. So we have had the chance again today to listen from Bhagavatam and learn a bit. And I would like to end here. And maybe there is some questions or comments. And maybe even some of you remember some past time or incident where Krishna's opulences got manifested or revealed. It would be nice to hear. Hare Krishna.
I think that one pastime that Krishna most show your opulences is the Brahmana Lila, because Lord Brahma is a big Vedantist, and he knows that the Vishnu is the Lord, and when he stole the cows and the cow boys, Krishna is splendid, and after showed to him the form of Vishnu Chaturabhuja. This is very important, opulence is very present. I want to make a comment about the word Paribhasha Sutra. This is very important because Jiva Goswami in Tatra Sandarbha give so much attention for this word. Sutta Goswami described the basis of the Vaishnava philosophy in chapter 1, 2, and chapter 3 of first canto. He described the different incarnations, avatar. But Krishna not is avatar. Krishna is a avatari. He is the source of all avatars. All avatars described before this verse 27 are coming of Krishna. Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam. Paribhasha Sutra means that this sutra, this line, Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam, this line have the property, have the authority to interpretation, yes, hermeneutic property, to interpret not all verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, but the whole verses of Vedas. All verses of the Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, Upanishads that have disagreed, that show Krishna not is God, can be interpreted by this verse, Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam. This is the definitive verse that establishes Krishna, how the Supreme Personality of Godhead have many gods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nice established in this verse. And the commentary of Jiva Goswami is splendid for this Paribhasha Sutra.
Thank you, Maharaj Mahaprabhu.
Also, just something I heard on the Paribhasa Sutra that my spiritual master said. He said that
each text has a Paribhasa Sutra, so the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam, and you should view the text according to this verse. So for example, in the Bhagavatam, there's statements which maybe slightly neglect the fact that Krishna is God or something, but because that's the Paribhasa Sutra, everything should be seen as through the lens of that verse. That's like the seed verse, or the everything should be perceived based on that tattva or that philosophy. Then the rest of the scripture is taken in that. That's more expressions.
And what is it in Bhagavad Gita? The Paribhasa Sutra?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's I don't know, speculating.
The verse 8 establishes Krishna's God. Aham savas prabhava dasavam pravakati. Always, ever spiritual material comes from Krishna. Aham, I am the God. I am the Bhagavan.
And this is the first verse of the chapter Shlok.
Yeah. Then
I want to mention something about Sanskrit. About Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is the most complete language we know in this world. And this language has a power. All other languages lost this power. I read once that Old Greek or Old Egyptian or Latin, Old Hebrew, all them, they had some of this power still in their language. But in the last few centuries, all these languages lost their power. Therefore also this mantra, the Brahmanas in the Vedic times, with mantras they could do so many things only because of the sound, and of course it was always in Sanskrit. But if I say now in German, it's no use of it. Even if I say Kugelschreiber to somebody who doesn't speak German, he has no idea what. But if I say this word in Sanskrit, there is an impact. There is some result. You do not know it, but it is the result. Therefore, if you read these verses in Sanskrit, they are so powerful. Even we don't know any about the meaning, it's working.
Well, Father compares the sound of thunder. you don't know that where it comes, but it's very strong.
I have a question. I was just wondering, from a material point of view, it's very difficult to understand that sound carries, or a word can carry an energy or a potency to it. So I'm just wondering if you could help me understand, help us understand how, from a material point of view, it's very difficult to grasp the fact that the Mahamantra has some potency, or is non-different to Krishna, or the sound carries potency or energy. So I'm wondering if you can help us understand in some way.
It's a very good question. I think it's a difficult question. But let me just try to say something. When I was preparing the class, I tend to go into Samkhya. I feel so attracted to Samkhya all the time. I have a taste. And then I was thinking if I should speak about first, sound, and because the problem is I couldn't find the verse, and I didn't have much time, and I just thought maybe Krishna wants me to. Somewhere in Bhagavatam, in a part where Samkhya is described, the element sound. I wasn't sure it was ether and sound definitely connected, and then it was described how all the elements and what is their function, because you can. It was described by symptoms, the symptoms of sound, or the symptom of ether is that there is sound, then there is ether, and it was described how sound it can transfer concepts, ideas about an object. Words especially. Of course there is also sound like that, which it's a difference. But words, they are meant to transfer an idea, a concept about a certain thing which might not be in your experience. And Prabhupada, I think, gives an example. He says, like if you want to go to Brazil. I've never been to Brazil, but if Mahakrishna Prabhu comes and says, you know, Brazil, it's so nice place. There is a beach, then there's many nice fruits, and he would have to go on, I don't know. Then it will give me an idea, definitely. Of course, sound has its limitations because there is always a sender and a receiver. I think that's an important point. We heard about how sound has an intrinsic potency, especially Sanskrit. But then, one thing that came to mind, even if Prabhupada spoke in English, in Bengali is also a spiritual language. If Prabhupada spoke in English and somebody was in the class who doesn't understand English, it will give the same benefit because the sender is fully conscious and he will receive that. So there's the sound, the sender, the receiver. And let's say Mahakrishna goes to a child who didn't even learn language and he will talk, it will not be received. So then, even though the sender has all the knowledge and he can put it into, it will not be received. These are some thoughts, you know, sender, receiver, and the actual message. I remember we had a discussion about Shabda Brahman with one devotee from Langtan temple. There's a lot of stress of, the pure devotee. You have to hear from the pure devotee. And we had a discussion, and the point was that you have to listen from a living sadhu, pure devotee, and only that is actually sufficient. It was an interesting discussion. We spoke about how, because the point was made that actually not reading is not enough, or listening to a tape is not Shabda Brahman, something like that. And he was saying that it can only remind you of what you already know, it cannot give you more. I still don't know if it's true, because I told him, my argument was, if, let's say, one soul is very sincere, but there is no, somehow or other there is no availability of a living sadhu, Krishna will give you from inside through that medium. And he was agreeing kind of, but we didn't have any proof. So, but definitely if, now your question, I think, what can we really take out? We know sound is most important to become Krishna conscious, and it's there's so much emphasis, Shravanam, Kirtanam is the essence. And we know that there is a sender, a receiver, and then the actual message as well. So if we think we are not yet most advanced, we should be eager to come to a person who sends out Shabda Brahman, who is most potent. And then if we are in that association, we will get the most benefit. Like, whoever was with Prabhupada, you can't stop your advancement if you're around Prabhupada, because he's so powerful. He's emanating Krishna consciousness, and especially through his words. So you also have something.
I want to say something about sound. Sound is a power. Everybody can feel this. With sound you can make somebody crazy. Or you can even make him die. Or with sound you can crash a window, Yeah. And about the information, if you have a membrane Membranzingen.
Membrane.
And you put sand on it, and you give the demim a sound that it gives a beautiful picture. And if you take Vedic mantras, you will get all the same picture. That means the sound can transmit sand to a beautiful ornament. That's the power of sound. I think you heard about this experience. And everybody can try this at home also. But if the sound is too loud, this
Eardrum.
it will crack.
Yeah.
Yes, that means this power is very powerful.
It's the most powerful thing. No, in the wars, when they started, mantras was the most powerful.
Yeah, everything started with sound. The whole creation started with sound. That means it's so powerful. And then if the sound becomes less subtle or more gross, until here this is also sound, compact. Because everything anyway is energy. But sound is the most subtle one. Everything starts with sound.
Nice point, yeah. Okay, thank you, devotees. We have a little bit after 8:30. We can end here. Have a nice day. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaura Premanande.
Damodar Prasad Prabhu ki
Yeah.
No, one thing that just to mind now is, when we read, for example, Prabhupada's books again and again, when we, after some years, we say that we always some many things come through, because as a recipient we become more qualified.
So I was thinking about this discussion you had with Brahma. But the evidence is clear because many people who have received Prabhupada's books have changed their lives.
There was also, I remember one point was that, because he was making the point, it can only remind you of what you already done.
Sure.
What is already in you. But then we hear the verse like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Prem is, everybody is Krishna Prem, it's not something to add, you just
Breaking the seed.
yeah. It was quite a discussion. We didn't come to a conclusion which was not so good because of these topics. You have been to Lanka? Yeah, they put a lot of emphasis on it. They are, most of them is guru of the disciple of Govinda Maharaj. So there's a lot of emphasis in it. Some people know Chaitanya Chandra, this Indian body from Orissa.
Yeah, it's definitely important.
Yeah.
Essential. Like you said, if someone doesn't have access, then
Right, it's, these absolute statements.
it's always a way. Yeah, I think that's I sort of